Guru Nation, welcome to another episode of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. I'm Dan Sfera. I have Dr. Irfan Khan from Circuit Clinical. You can see him on here if you're listening on the podcast. This is also on YouTube. Dr. Khan, I don't want to speak for him, so why don't you introduce Circuit Clinical just so we have a little bit of context? And then I want to get back into your origin stories, how you got started in research, who you are. But why don't we start with, what is Circuit Clinical?
Sure, and thanks, Dan, for the opportunity. So Circuit is what we call an integrated research organization. We're based up in upstate New York. And the idea is to bring clinical trials into spaces where healthcare is delivered, but previously haven't been doing clinical trials. So doctors' offices, large group practices, even some hospitals where they've had a tradition of excellent healthcare, but they haven't been doing any clinical research. So it's been sort of this layered approach.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, we built platform technology to help patients find and choose research, and we've been scaling that up as well.
I see. Okay, so you're not just local in Buffalo anymore. This is nationwide.
Yeah. It's TrialScout is the name of our patient engagement platform. It's the first ratings and reviews for clinical trial centers. That was launched last fall and has been scaling successfully over the last year. So that's live across the country.
Interesting. And then you have I saw on your website, you have a BioBank. How does that integrate into Circuit Clinical?
Yeah, it's all part of how we see creating value for the health systems we work with. And we've scaled this value proposition up now to the level of ACOs and accountable care organizations and to large hospital systems. So they're all looking for ways to create new opportunities for their patients. And what we've done is layer it into clinical trials as kind of our bread and butter, the base of our market. And we provide those places, those physician practices and hospitals, additional opportunities for value creation. So that includes biospecimen collections. As we got into that, the university decided, near us, State University of New York, University of Buffalo, approached us with the idea for a partnership in which we would be able to do targeted specimen collections and store them in their biorepository. And that was really the beginning of this biobanking idea. So they're all tied around how do we create new opportunities for patients to participate in the process of the discovery of new medicines.
Interesting. Yeah, and I was just at DIA a couple months back, and that seems to be one of the key topics almost every year now for the last couple of years is getting patients engaged. And there was also a lot about site networks. So we're going to get into some of that. But let's go way back. Who are you? What is your origin story? And then we'll go from there.
Sure. So by training, I am a cardiologist, a particular breed that puts in pacemakers and defibrillators and burns out short circuits in the heart. So that's called cardiac electrophysiology. I was fortunate enough to train at Case Western Reserve at Metro Health with David Rosenbaum. It was a great program. It was very, very focused on good doctors should be good clinicians, but they should also be good researchers. So this is going back about 20 years now. And that training really stood me in good stead. I came to Buffalo because I'm from Toronto originally. Okay. This was a nice chance to be closer to home, but practice the kind of medicine I was trained in. And we continued that process. We built a very large electrophysiology program, but it wasn't just pure private practice, putting in devices and ablating people. It was also built around clinical research. And so we had the opportunity to do both device trials and therapeutic trials. And bring that out to people who had never seen that opportunity before. And that was really the beginning of Circuit, because in a group with 19 providers, we had 3 doctors who really believed in research and really made the time commitment and really wanted to bring it to those patients. Mm-hmm. And in watching how difficult it was to bring that to patients came the idea for a different kind of network that could bring the operational layer into healthcare spaces and create a whole new group of people who could participate without having to go any further than their own doctor's office.
So how does that happen? I'm always curious. How did you guys discover clinical research? Because it's very difficult. I feel like most physicians still don't understand, and you probably I deal with this on a daily basis. I'm sure you do too. I mean, how did that happen? It doesn't just appear. How did you get introduced to clinical research?
So when I was a fellow, this is, like I said, 15, 20 years ago, in my cardiac EP fellowship, we had we were part of one of the largest and longest running defibrillator trials. And it was a kind of trial where it ended up being really important in understanding who benefits from a defibrillator, and it broadened the circle of people who were eligible. And that trial, that very long, patient, painstaking process of finding patients, bringing them the opportunity, explaining it to them, that was pivotal in my training, because you saw the impact. Defibrillator trials are interesting because when you're participating, you're seeing the impact of clinical trials while you're executing the study. You're clearly seeing these things are going off and saving lives. They're improving heart failure. And it was a very motivating idea that these patients were really lucky. They were at a place where the doctors knew about clinical trials and participated in them, and even supported the ones that they didn't participate in. It was a real culture of research. And as I went into private practice, I got very fortunate again to end up in a group that felt the same way about these things. It was a private practice group, but it was really well structured to execute clinical trials. They'd been doing them for 20 years when I got there.
Wow.
And so from those two experiences, that really led me to see that there's a willingness in both academic and in private practice healthcare to do trials if the infrastructure is there.
I see. Prior to you joining the private practice, when you were introduced to research in the academic setting, did you think it was possible to do research in the private setting? Because I talked to a lot of academics, and it's amazing. They don't understand that they're actually able to do research in the private setting as well. They just assume all research is academic, which is actually not the case. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for those two experiences. To have balanced kind of my career between the academic and the private world has been really useful, because there are some folk mythologies on both sides, and absolutely in academic medicine, there is this conception that it's really all of the major centers that are creating the new knowledge. And it's certainly true that they're the ones generating the ideas and getting the ball rolling and getting sponsors involved. But when you look at the numbers, as you know, the bulk of the enrollments are done by private professional research centers that can actually process patients. On the other side, when I talk to my friends who are in brick and mortar clinical research sites or in broad site networks, they'll smile at how inefficient academic medicine is. But because I work with those systems pretty regularly now, I see how much has changed in the last, call it 3 or 4 years, where there's been a move towards central IRB, a move to streamlining informed consent inside the institutions, really? And a desire to partner with professional research facilities. So I think that's a good trend too.
Yeah, why do you think they're moving in that direction, especially as far as like the central IRB and streamlining some of the inefficient processes?
I think the CTSI initiative has gone a long way. This building of these, I think they were at 79 the last time I counted them, these clinical translational science institutes across the country, where the NIH has mandated that it's important for academic institutions to rethink engagement with patients, both in the community and in research, and rethink partnerships, both with other institutions and with private research entities. And I think that's gone a long way to changing the culture.
So the CTSI initiative, I mean, I should probably look into this. So basically the NIH said, hey, if you want to get these grants, you got to be more efficient. Is that the bottom line of what the NIH was telling them?
Yeah, it's a great summary. I think ultimately where the NIH is aimed is bringing the patient's voice to the center of the conversation, and to reduce some of the burdens that patients feel on their journey. And it's that mission obviously aligns pretty closely with what we do, both on the clinical network side, making it easy to find a trial near you, but also on the TrialScout side, creating a platform where patients can literally talk about the experience they had in these trials and share ratings and reviews of those centers.
Wow, we're gonna definitely get into that because I'm interested. Okay, so academic setting, then private practice. How many years did you spend in the private practice?
The total of 12.
12 years. Okay, so academic first, then 12 years as a PI and sub-I in the private practice setting. And so how did we get from that to circuit clinical, or did that evolve into circuit clinical?
Yeah, no, it was a process. I would say it was probably a year of my life where I was trying to do it both, live sort of both the successful clinical practice and then a complete dichotomy where I'm spinning up the first projects and talking to the first sets of doctors. But it became pretty clear early on that for circuit to become what I wanted it to become, it was going to take a full-time commitment. So at the end of 2015, I made the decision to wind down my practice and to dedicate sort of full time attention to growing Circuit, and that's been a great run.
Wow. Okay. So what is when you founded Circuit, what was the mission? Was it to get research naive physicians to do research? What was the core mission at that time?
Yeah, I'm happy to say that the mission hasn't changed at all since we got started, and the team. I like to think the team could probably describe it themselves. We've got it on enough walls that I think it's helpful. But I think fundamentally, it's why the people work here. So it's stated simply, we're here to make it easier for patients to find, evaluate, and participate in clinical trials. And we believe that if we do that, we'll improve the patient experience in clinical trials.
Interesting. Okay. And a lot of, because I kind of have a loose site network now as well.
Mm-hmm.
About 50 sites across the country at any given time. We're trying to grow, of course, but it's hard to educate sponsors. I think it's a little easier now in a 2019 world. They understand more of what a site network is, but I still get a lot. I had a call earlier today with a CRO. They didn't understand our model. They asked, "Are you an SMO? What is your relationship with all these sites?" I'm sure you encounter that as well.
Yeah.
How do you define what Circuit is to these sponsors?
So I give Jennifer Byrne over at Javara a lot of credit for coining this term integrated research organization, because I think it allows her to be kind of a new label for organizations that are partners with health systems and partners with existing sites and partners with physician practices who want to be doing research and integrating into those spaces to create the research infrastructure. I think that's a really nice way of thinking about it. And, I share your pain for what that's worth. I'm constantly saying that, no, this is not a contract research organization. No, they're our friends. We work with them all the time, that kind of thing. I think on our end, it gets even trickier because we're both a clinical services company as well as a digital services company, and very focused on keeping that value through integration.
Integrated Research Organization. That is a good one. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess, what is, if you can speak about it, what is the business model of Circuit when it comes to integrating with other physicians? I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm assuming it's research naive many times.
Many times, yeah. And in that respect, the model looks similar to our friends over at Elego and other places where they've tried it, where they come into a practice and they try to assess. We go in there and we're trying to figure out, well, how much help do you need? And the value exchange is always dependent on, are we doing everything? Are we bringing the coordinators in and handling feasibility? Are we layering in our digital layer with TrialScout throughout the organization as well and creating ratings and reviews and doing benchmarking and stuff? So depending on how much we're doing for them changes the experience. What most of the practices we've encountered, and we've experienced pretty low attrition in 4 years, have been built around is this idea that if they see us as partners on this opportunity to create something new for their patients, it tends to be a very successful engagement. But it is different than the classic brick and mortar, do everything from scratch on your own side.
I see. So if a site wanted to join your network, are you, first of all, are you even seeking new sites to join, or how do they do it?
Yeah, we have a catalog of places that have sort of reached out to us and asked, are we interested in expanding to this region or that region? And some of them are very large opportunities. So it's always, as you know, it's about managing growth and managing expectations and making sure we're sort of the work we take on fits our mission. It is Circuit's intention to grow. We have a scale plan for 2020 and beyond. We don't think we need to be in any rush to do that. So really for us, where we've had success is with fit, when we think the physician leadership and the practice management leadership are aligned with the health systems and the universities, when they're getting what they need to get in order to be successful from us, when that's a true value add for them, we find those opportunities get closed very quickly. So it's really a question of us being patient and really kind of getting to know the places where we're considering partnering with to say, yes, we can create value here and bring them some new opportunities.
I see. Do you form a joint venture with the sites, or do you take a percentage of their company, or is it hybrid, or is it case by case?
We're at, I think, 28 institutions and 3 accountable care organizations. No two are really exactly the same. And so
Wow.
it's really a question of trying to understand what is this partner of ours looking to accomplish in clinical research? How well does that suit what we're good at? I'll give you an example that we're very proud of. This last year, we were selected by Roswell Park Cancer Institute, which is an NCI cancer institution that has a very storied history over the last 100 years. And Roswell Park is bringing one of their cancer vaccine drugs out into their outpatient clinical research practices. And so we're the agent that's been selected by them to bring that opportunity to those outpatient sites. And as they just announced they're scaling out their network across the state, it looks to be a great opportunity for us to create new value, new research opportunities for patients in the years ahead. So that's a completely different model than everything we've done before, and it was years in the making. But it's a sign of how if we're flexible and we have flexible partners and we're really focused on how do we create value for these patients, we can do a lot of interesting things both on the clinical side and on the digital side.
Wow, that's a tremendous growth. So 28 sites now since 2015 or 2016 when you started?
Yeah, I would say 2016 is really when we got rolling. That was, up until then it had been largely, notional, conceptual stuff, talking with, local friends, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2016 we got very lucky, and I was fortunate enough to meet Carrie Hicks, and Carrie is the founder and CEO of HealthGrades. And HealthGrades,
okay.
For those who don't know, is where it's the website, the very first real scaled website where you go to rate your doctors after you visit with them. Mm-hmm. And HealthGrades had this magnificent 8-year run, basically just by giving patients a voice in the healthcare space. Made a gigantic exit a few years back, and Carrie had formed a venture capital firm to look at digital innovations across the healthcare space. And when we met and we talked it through, it was really our interest in building something for clinical trial patients to talk about that experience. There's 5 million Americans out there who've been in clinical trials, and they really don't have any platform to have their say.
Right.
And it was our focus on doing that brought him into the company. And so in 2016 is really when the network started to grow.
Wow. Yeah, and I guess that makes sense. That's where TrialScout gets in to the picture. And
yep.
I do want to spend some time talking about that. I'm just curious, with all this growth, are you still yourself a PI for any studies?
I'm still on a couple of studies,
okay.
But to do it well and to give time to it. So I'm better off these days as a sub-I. The gentleman who can read the occasional EKG is probably where my career is heading. Which is funny after 10 years of medical training in cardiology and cardiac electrophysiologist. I think my great contribution to clinical trials will be reading a lot of EKGs before I'm done, but that's okay. I think we're accomplishing some good things there.
See, I think you're an inspiration for a lot of physicians that are just discovering research. I mean, I come across them on a weekly basis now, and they're always asking, okay, what is the end game here? Like for me, what's the strategy? And I tell them that all depends on you. I mean, I know many physicians happy with just their site, and they make very good living out of it, very good lifestyle. Others want to expand. Others want to disrupt the industry, which is what you're doing. Others get into the sponsor side. I mean, it's almost limitless to what you can do as a physician. I think the most important thing is get started somehow so you could learn the fundamentals, right?
And I think that's great advice, because I think it absolutely starts with the fundamentals. If you don't know the process, if you haven't been, I used to joke about this all the time. I've been an investigator and a sub-I on a lot of studies. But I'm the guy who will find the patients. I'm not looking for the thought leadership or the glory. I really do like bringing clinical trials into the healthcare space and helping patients find them. But it does remind me a lot of medicine in the sense that there's something for everybody. I mean, and you see people making valuable contributions across the industry. And when you get to know their backgrounds, they come from every stripe that you can imagine. Nurses, doctors, physical therapists, people who've never done anything in the healthcare space but had great business acumen and saw a way to create new value in that space. I agree. That's good advice, Doc. And I think it all starts with the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm. Tremendous growth for you guys. Is looking at it from outside, right? An outsider's perspective. And I'm kind of doing similar things here with our site network. We've evolved slowly into a CRO, a very boutique CRO. My goal is to get equity in some of these early stage biotechs before they get big. So we're offering our
Yeah,
services at a premium discount. That's my business model while the
that's a
site
great
network
model.
continues. Well, but what is yours? Like, are you seeing that are you evolving into a CRO, or is that not something you're going to do? What is the strategy for you guys?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think because of our unique digital play, I think that a lot of what happens to us, it remains seated in the work of sites. So, for example, everything that the world sees on TrialScout was first kept inside and staging inside our own network and tested with real patients and real doctors using the interface and stuff. So, our digital play gives us a very site-oriented, site-specific. And so when we look at our site work, we're very interested in partnering with pretty much anybody doing clinical trials. Well, we have the ability, because of our data access to the EMRs, to look across a very large swath of patients and really look for those hits that are meaningful. But I see our evolution being greater and greater focused on site success by bringing the patient experience and the patient voice front and center. When health grades first started, doctors were terrified about the fact that somebody was going to get on there and give them a 1-star review.
Yeah.
And what proved out was that that's not typically what happens. That's the rare exception. Most people are really excited about sharing great healthcare experiences because they know how important it is and how powerful it is. And I have a strong disposition to believe the same thing will happen with TrialScout, is that most of what we're going to see is patients helping patients move past this idea that, am I a guinea pig, or am I going to be on placebo, or I heard about some awful experiments 50 years ago. I don't think it's going to be doctors and researchers who change people's minds about that. I think it's going to be other people sharing what happened to them 3 years ago and how positive it was for them. And I think that's what we get excited about in terms of being able to bring the network out across in our scale plan, but really to let TrialScout help sites everywhere, regardless of whether they're part of our network or not.
So it's site focused. I'm imagining this is going to be, or maybe already is, attractive to some sponsors, right? They want efficiencies. They want streamlined approach. It's only a matter of time until they ask you, hey, do you also have CRAs that can monitor the data? Have you been asked that already?
So our early work, we have three kinds of institutional clients that we're having early success with, and that all predict a pretty nice trajectory for this. One is the health systems themselves, the large institutional health systems. So launching shortly will be the TrialScout Top 50 Awards, in which our algorithm has basically generated a list of the companies, the health systems that are doing best by previous clinical trials experience, quality from the CMS database, and facilities based on what the Homeland Security databases say about them. That algorithm is open to only one thing, and that's patient experience. So as that scales up, new systems can kind of come into play if they're doing a great job with patient experience.
Wow, and they don't have to be, and they don't have to be part of Circuit Clinical to be.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Because it's more consistent with our broader vision. While we love the network's growth and we focus on that, really our mission is to do things that, disruption is an interesting word. It's a little too chaotic for my liking. I like transformation. I think there's an opportunity to transform what the patient experience looks like and feels like in research, and we see TrialScout as a part of that. We see site networks like yours and ours and many others as part of that process too, because each one of them makes it easier for a patient to say yes to research. They don't have to travel far to get to those places. So both sides of that equation are interesting. So health systems have already signed on to learn from patients, to tell their story to patients, share more content.
Hats off. That's a tough sell. That's a tough sell.
Yeah, so far it's been pretty good, actually. Yeah.
Are you the main, I guess, driving force for getting these sales? Because I've worked with some of these large healthcare systems, and they're usually very much opposed to any changes to their infrastructure. How did you manage to pull that off? I mean, I guess that's where your academic background comes in handy.
It doesn't hurt. Circuit's special sauce is that we're treated like a healthcare company. We are a healthcare company for all intents and purposes. So when we interact with other companies in other health systems, we're treated as an entity they understand. That definitely helps. And then I think the other part of it is that our timing is really good. TrialScout's only designed to do one thing, which is allow patients who've had an experience to share that experience with other patients and with health systems that they're involved with. And we live in an era now where we're in the experience era. This next digital revolution is all about sort of what's happening in the experience everywhere. When we buy shoes on Amazon, we're looking at the ratings and reviews before we hit purchase.
Right.
Health system is very sensitive to the data they get from all of the various physician rating websites. And I think that pharma and the CROs are going to benefit from that data space in clinical trials, and certainly the health systems are too. It's very interesting that in the last 5 years, pretty much every major health system now has a VP of patient experience. So our timing is...
It's spot on. I could spend an entire, multiple hours talking about how you've built the business, and we'll probably have to do a part 2 and 3. But let's spend some time now on TrialScout, because I think that's your differentiator, really, for what Circuit Clinical does. So there's, reviews. I mean, this is something that is gonna be tough to pull off, but there's a need for it. Healthcare needs to do what all the other industries have done, where it's like customer, consumer, and big pharma's trying to do it with patient centricity and virtual trials. It all kind of ties into it. How you must have some concerns, or at least getting some resistance from the sponsors, concerned about patients unblinding themselves. I'm sure this comes up quite a bit.
Absolutely.
How is that a real concern, first of all? And then how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate concern. I think that the concern is that they'll unblind themselves, or that they had a bad day on a drug and they make that's the point of their commentary. We have addressed that because it's not what TrialScout's designed to do. I mean, when you're trying to optimize for the experience and the experience share, that has a very specific meaning to us. So we're interested in things that sites can learn from to optimize and to improve patients, and ideally even prevent a patient who might be dissatisfied, but who's salvageable, who doesn't want to drop out, who just wants a better experience. So when patients go to rate and review on TrialScout, we handle it in 2 different ways. For specific sponsor projects, we do what's called choice architecture. So we might use icons instead of open free text, where they can comment on things that are still actionable, still improve the experience, things like the wait time, how they were treated, distance to the parking lot, so, sort of functional things that if you had the data telling you that, hey, this is the one thing your site needs in order to be even better at this, and here's a comparison to sites around the country like you. If you're wondering, well, I'm a 3 out of 5 on this, maybe everybody's a 3, but no, most sites are actually a 3.5 or a 4.5. There's an opportunity for you to improve, and here's some best practices. That's useful. That's intelligence that you can actually take an action on. So that's one part of it. So choice architecture helps a little bit. The other one that we found is that for patients to talk about the experience is one thing, but it's not Yelp. It isn't that you write a comment and it's posted within a second. They post to this thing, and we have a tank that it goes into for 7 days for adjudication, which is when we do things like review it to see, we have a whole team that looks at these comments to make sure that nothing is violating the terms of service. It isn't about, hey, listen, I had a terrible bleed last night. That's important information, and it belongs with your site. And the patient's corrected that, hey, this can't be posted to TrialScout because that's not what TrialScout's for. But you should absolutely talk to your doctor immediately about these kinds of things. So the idea is that really it's about giving patients a space where they've had something much more profound they could share, which is really, why did they choose research? What was the experience like? What would they improve about it? And why would they recommend it to the next person down the line? It's an amazing stat. I did some back-of-the-envelope calculations. I'll have an article coming out soon that looks at this. And there's 5 million living Americans who've been in clinical trials and could tell us something really interesting about the institutions and the spaces where it was done. And they've never had a place to have that, say, at a collective, in a collective kind of way. And this is a solution for that.
Wow. Yeah, that is interesting. How that there are some extra filters, I guess, you need to keep those confidential things out of there. Do you ever see this industry allowing patients to review actual studies as opposed to reviewing sites right now? Do you think that will ever happen?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I can tell you that from our friends in pharma and the CROs that I speak to, I've just met so many people whose full-time job is to think about how to improve the patient experience. We threw a symposium together earlier this summer that we called the Patient Experience Symposium, and had experts from Vertex and Icon and Medidata all kind of join us to walk through how would we collect information like this successfully, and the feedback was just so usefully candid, about what the concerns were. You named a couple of them just now, and where the opportunities were to learn. And all I see are people who work in industry at the highest levels of patient engagement and patient experience, working very hard to figure out how to. I don't see patient centricity as a buzzword when I talk to those leaders. I view it as something that they're absolutely trying to get to. So I do see patients being brought in right now to give feedback on the protocol, for example. Mm-hmm. I think that's a hop, skip, and a jump away from patients being able to comment later about how they felt about that particular cardiovascular trial. The trick is, what are they comparing it to, right? Fundamentally, and how do we help them sort of facilitate that? And I see good companies popping up now to try to say, hey, would you prefer to have your medicines like this regimen or that regimen in the feasibility stage? I think there's good projects underway right now doing that stuff. And I think that's part of that whole thing. I don't think it's one solution. I don't think it's one website, not even the one we've built. I think it's going to be a collaboration from a lot of different interesting innovators kind of saying, here are some ways to simplify learning what a patient thinks. I think if we make it easy for pharma clearly cares about that.
I see. Yeah, that does actually make sense. Unlike Yelp, where theoretically you could go eat at a restaurant for every meal, in clinical research, you're probably not in more than one study a year, and that's at that is at an extreme interval. Usually it's one study in a lifetime, maybe a couple in a lifetime. So that's a new set of challenges and maybe opportunities there as well.
I think what's interesting about a patient's journey in a clinical trial, and I had a friend of mine, sort of gently correct me that it's not really a journey. A journey is a pleasant thing. It's more like an odyssey where, you might be stranded on an island for a year. It's a little more complicated than a simple journey, and that might be true. But they have multiple experiences. And so one of the things that we're really excited about with TrialScout is that we can track the patient's relative experience over time. So if it's 5 stars the first visit and 5 stars the second visit and 2 stars the third visit, that's a critical junction. And so it triggers an automatic intervention, So there's these ways to think about what does that patient's global experience look like, and how does that compare to all the other patients at that one research site? And then how does that compare to all the sites in a study? So that's the fun part about technology, is it can aggregate and analyze data like that and generate pretty interesting analytics that, in our opinion, the only goal here is site success, because when sites are successful, patients are successful. And that's really what the aim of TrialScout is.
Interesting. That I haven't even thought of that. How the site's ratings change based on the same patient's visits at different intervals.
Yeah.
Do the sites would this be similar to a patient-reported outcome where the sites have to remind the patient, hey, can you kindly leave a review from this visit? Is that something Circuit Clinical has their sites do?
So we built everything that the world sees in TrialScout first lived inside the Circuit Clinical network. In fact, the stuff we have in staging and in dev right now, those will first go inside our own network where we learn from patients in the real world. I take the great advice from our friends over at Savvy Co-op when they point out how rarely is our product designed for patients with actual patient feedback. So we're not perfect, but we certainly have access to a lot of great patients, and we avail ourselves of it on a regular basis. I think at a higher level, I think that it's really one of these things where that particular feedback is the step towards maybe changing some savable situations where a person was spoken rudely to, or a person just become disengaged. And here's an opportunity to re-engage them or to apologize in some cases and to make them feel better about it and keep them in that. But we look at all of that experiential data as very different than ePro. I mean, we're not allowing them to talk about things like what symptoms they're having or what side effects they're having. There's a great space for that. There's already great companies in that space. Right. We're happy to direct patients back into that space. But what TrialScout's trying to capture is, how does it feel? Because when I look at the retention problem and we say, 1 in 4 across the entire board drop out of clinical trials, it's a multi-billion-dollar space to create some new value for patients, and that would iterate to new value for the sites. Obviously, retaining patients is good for the economic model, no matter which model you're using. And it's great for the sponsors because it goes right to how long does it take to close your data set. So I look at it like, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can any patient in any study use TrialScout? for any site?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're in the clinicaltrials.gov data set, your site is already on TrialScout. If it isn't, it's an easy creation, but that's the rare exception.
Really?
So
Okay.
the site's it's sort of like the early days of Yelp, if you will, or the
So
early days of health.
a lot of you guys watching and listening, you might already have. We have a lot of site owners that watch and listen.
Yeah.
What's the website? Trialscout.com?
Trialscout.com. Yeah, you may have seen it in your local paper. We're getting a lot of attention from the media from this project we're doing called the Clinical Trials Landscape. And what we did was TrialScout's special sauce. What it does differently is we took the clinicaltrials.gov database down and transformed it to talk about the actual places where research is done. So what we're able to do from that, Ben, is to run an analysis on which centers have been doing clinical trials in Tampa or in Seattle. And so we've been on this little project where we're releasing a city a week, and some weeks it's a couple of cities a week, showing the 21 largest metropolitan service areas. And as we've done, it's just a free data share. We didn't try to monetize it or write a report and sell it to the hospitals. We thought, no, patients deserve to sort of see what their cities look like and how it's changed over time, looking at the clinicaltrials.gov database. Now, is the database of clinicaltrials.gov perfect, and does it capture every trial? No. So there's misses in there, but it gives you a really nice view of the field of clinical research around the country.
Yes. No, it's far from perfect. I think that's the opportunity. Clinicaltrials.gov was designed for patients to find studies. And what it's actually evolved into is a biz dev tool for sites to find studies that they can maybe participate in. Not that many patients are using it. It's not user friendly. It's not like they're marketing around clinicaltrials.gov. I mean, it's the government. It's just there. And I think that's the opportunity for innovators like you guys to get in there. I'm on trialscout.com now. So I just Googled a zip code of where I'm at. My computer's a bit slow. But yeah, trialscout.com for anyone interested. You can find trials. So this truly is patient facing. It's
Yeah. It generates powerful analytics on the back end. And there are modules that are specific to our health system partners and our sponsor partners. But there is a full functionality to any patient who's ever been in it. You're going to see me follow up with you on support for our Find the Five campaign. So we're doing a social media campaign shortly to really get all of our friends who have access to patients who've been in clinical trials to get out there and raise. There's 5 million Americans who have something to say, and we really do want to make this really clear to them that people care. The next 5 million patients are going to need to hear from you guys in order to make better decisions to choose research as a care option. So yeah, absolutely. The website's designed to be friendly to the patient. If you click on the front page, at the top of the page is a light green banner at the top, and it says about the clinical trials landscape. If you click there, you'll see really a map that has been in plain sight for 19 years, and all we did was the data transformation to allow us to show people what clinical trials look like in any given city and what the history of that particular city has been. And that's been a real success for us in terms of our utility to people who are searching online and to the media who's found it and stuff. It's been great for TrialScout's awareness kind of all over the country, from Seattle to Tampa. We've been getting media coverage for it. So it's something we're happy to do. When it's completed, we're going to put out the full report as a white paper for free to download for anybody who wants to look at it and share it with their friends and stuff. And the idea is just, we fundamentally believe the more people can see what clinical trials are, why they're important, what people like them have said about it, the next person is likelier to choose clinical research as a care option, and that's a great thing.
I see. Is it, for the sites, is it free to use this, or is there a charge for having a profile on TrialScout?
Yeah. So there's a small charge for small sites. We're actually likely to move away from that model shortly for the brick and mortars who are doing great work and they have very tight unit economics. We found ways that we could share value. So, for example, it may turn into a situation with the small sites if they're willing to host a link back to their own page on TrialScout so people can rate their site easier. We'll give them a complimentary enhanced profile with better art and video. We're very much about the site success, and we think site success means a healthy amount of small sites around the country as well as the large institutional players. Now, the health systems, the large institutional research centers, yes, they pay a subscription fee to have access to deeper analytics, do customized surveying through TrialScout's engine. Pharma and CROs can pay to to manage the patient experience across an entire clinical trial. So our model for the sites, for the viewers of your podcast, feel free to reach out. It's Irfan at circuitclinical.com, IRFAN at circuitclinical.com. We'd love to connect, or just get to TrialScout and send us an email via contact. And if you're running a kind of a brick and mortar or a small clinical research site in one office, we want to do everything we can to support you and help you be successful in that space. So more to come on that, but notionally that's where we're sitting.
Very interesting. So it's designed, in addition to give feedback on sites, it's actually designed to be a discovery tool for patients. Hey, there's a site near me for breast cancer, for example. And it's going to show me, if I'm the patient, the sites near me that have done breast cancer studies in the past and what their ratings are. Right? Am I summarizing that?
You nailed it exactly. It should feel very much like an Amazon experience, where you search and you get a result that does two things. I'm saying but it's really our brilliant TrialScout group who's put this thing together based on best practices from across the West Coast and of course our health grades understanding. Mm-hmm. It really boils down to people typically when they make an online choice need to know two things. What do people like me do? And what do people like me think? And so when you're looking for a clinical trial, and we have tremendous respect for the clinicaltrials.gov team. I mean, that is a Herculean undertaking. It's the information is presented so completely that it can sometimes be overwhelming. And when I talk to patients, frequently these days I get calls from patients or emails from patients or friends, frankly, asking me to look for a clinical trial. And I don't ever point out that, well, you can do the exact same search on TrialScout I'm going to do. And what they're looking for is, where do I go next? And that's the difference. That clinicaltrials.gov gives you a comprehensive list of the clinical trials by name in medical speak, and that can be a little intimidating. And so we focus on giving patients what they want to know, which is who near me is doing a clinical trial related to this description. How do I contact them and talk to them? And then most importantly, I think where we're going is, and what do people like me think? Right now, the objective algorithm is doing the heavy lifting, right? It's giving people every center a generic score. But the only thing that can change that score is patients getting on there and rating those centers.
Right.
And as they do, patient voice will become the single most important part of that rating.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm searching it now. I just put schizophrenia, because that's one of our biggest areas of research for some of our sites. Near me in Anaheim, I got about 10 results, different ratings. I could see the star ratings. So did these sites, a lot of them are universities, healthcare system, but some I recognize are private sites. Are they all paying a fee to be listed here, or are some of these not part of the Circuit Clinical Network? Explain how these sites get on here.
So the goal is service to the patient. So every site that's in clinicaltrials.gov is always going to be presented, right? And you can't pay to change your rating on TrialScout. So this is run by the same sort of standards that every great rating site is got. So you can't pay to change your rating. The only thing that being a subscriber gets you is you can share more content and you can enhance your profile there, and you can enhance where on the list your profile shows up. But the most important thing is to be useful to patients. So it's critical to let them see all the options they can choose from. And we're just early enough in it that right now the majority of profiles are, we call them standard. They're standard profiles. They're not enhanced yet. But if you search around Buffalo, for example, you'll see a bunch who've already come on board and there's a few across the country here as we get going. And very shortly, we will have a blitz of new ones coming on board. A lot of sites like your readers who will be joining us on this journey. And so the goal is then that they do end up in a promoted position on the rate page, on the search page, just like they do on Health Grades, for example. And they can share more content, more photos of the space. They can tell their own story in their own language. So it's less of a standard kind of vanilla experience. They're really getting to tell their own story.
I see. So it's basically taking the data from clinicaltrials.gov, but these reviews, like this site, for example, got 3.7 out of 5. Those are from actual patients, right?
So two things contribute to the rating. One is your standard objective score, which is the algorithm score based on what's in clinicaltrials.gov for experience, what's in CMS for quality, and what's in Homeland Security for your facilities and infrastructure. That's the base score. And then the only thing that can change the base score is what your patients say.
I
But
see.
the more patients that contribute ratings, very quickly the algorithm tilts to favor what the patients say. And once you hit a critical threshold of ratings, it's really essentially the patients are determining everything. The goal is to encourage sites to have their, the very sites who listen to your podcast are the ones doing great work, right? The ones that the patients are going to be satisfied day in and day out. And so having those patients rate on TrialScout, it's a 2-minute experience to rate. It takes less than 2 minutes, actually. And patients can do it at home, online, whenever they want. And the idea is that it's a way for great sites to very quickly rise to the top and really tell their story in a way that's validated, sort of third-party validation to pharma, to CROs. You can really point at your data and say, you don't have to take my word for the fact that we do a great job on retention and engagement. Here's what 35 patients of mine said in the last year, that kind of thing.
Interesting. Yeah, congrats on the growth, the success. We definitely have to do more. This has gone way over. Thank you for staying so late.
That was great.
We'll have to do a part 2 at some point because there's still a lot more I want to get into. If people want to reach you, I'm going to put the link underneath the video and on the podcast. Where should they go? Should they go to your LinkedIn? Should they go to Circuit Clinical website? Where do you want them to go to?
Yeah, so if they're looking to contact me specifically, LinkedIn is a great space. I use it a lot for everything, and I'm not one of these people who screens my accepts. I'm happy to connect with anybody who'd love to talk research. I'm all about that. If they'd like to email me, my email is just my first name, IRFAN, @circuitclinical.com. And if they're looking for more information generically about either TrialScout or about Circuit, we have info pages on both sites. We have both contact us pages on both of them. So if you just click through the website there, we've got a whole team that'll get right back to you within a day.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening, and we'll definitely do a part 2 at some point. So thanks again for coming on, and thank you, everybody, for watching.
Thanks for the opportunity. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.